Welcome to Valor and Violence, June 21st, 721. Somewhere in the fields outside Toulouse, 100,000 men disappear from history. Not retreat, not surrender, disappear. The morning after tells a story that makes no sense. Bodies everywhere, but not from siege warfare. No scaling ladders broken against walls. No ram-shattered gates. No evidence of a city taken or a city defended. Instead, an open field massacre. Umayyad camp stretched across 3 miles of Garonne. Riverside supply tents collapsed, cooking fires still smoldering, personal effects scattered like someone fled mid-meal. The Golden Command tent of Governor Al-Samh ibn Malik al-Khawlani, finest silk from Damascus, stands empty. Inside maps, half-rolled, wine cups knocked over, a single sandal. No governor, no body, just blood on expensive carpet. The survivors, those few who make it back to Narbonne, to Hispania, across the Pyrenees, tell contradictory stories. Some say the Franks came from inside the city. Others swear they came from the north. A few insist they materialized from nowhere, 10,000 cavalry appearing like jinn from dust clouds. None of them can explain how an army that had successfully besieged Toulouse for 3 months suddenly ceased to exist in less than 3 hours. Contemporary chronicles stay silent. The Chronicle of 754, written in Al-Andalus just 33 years later, dedicates exactly 4 sentences to what might be the most decisive battle of the 8th century. 4 sentences for 100,000 casualties. Historians Paul Foraker and Roger Collins would later call this the most underdocumented catastrophe of early medieval warfare. What happened at Toulouse didn't just kill an army, it killed a narrative. But to understand why that army vanished, you need to go back 60 days, to April, when Al-Samh was winning everything. The governor of Al-Andalus, all of Iberia under Umayyad control, crosses the Pyrenees with the largest invasion force seen in Frankish lands since Attila. Not a raiding party, not an exploratory probe. A full military campaign backed by Caliph Yazid II himself, designed to extend the caliphate to the Loire, perhaps to the Rhine. Contemporary Arab sources list the force at tens upon tens of thousands, likely exaggeration. But even conservative estimates put Al-Samh's army at 40 to 50,000 combat troops, plus auxiliaries, siege engineers, supply trains. This is Roman-scale logistics, Byzantine-level planning. Al-Samh doesn't raid, he conquers. Methodically. Narbonne, already under Umayyad control, serves as his staging ground. From there he moves west into Aquitaine, the independent duchy ruled by Odo the Great, who styles himself Prince of Aquitaine and answers to no Frankish king. Odo's territory stretches from the Pyrenees to the Loire, from the Atlantic to the Rhone. Wealthy, decentralized, vulnerable, April 17th. The fortress of Carcassonne falls after a 2-week siege. Al-Samh's siege engineers, trained in the art of reducing Byzantine strongholds, dismantle its defenses with professional efficiency. The garrison commander, a man named Odos, fights until the walls collapse. He dies in the rubble. Details here matter. Odos isn't just any commander. He's Odo's son-in-law. The duke's daughter watches from Toulouse as word arrives. Her husband dead. Her father's eastern frontier gone. Al-Samh doesn't stop for diplomacy. Doesn't offer terms. Carcassonne's fall opens the road to Toulouse itself, the real prize. The second largest city in Aquitaine after Bordeaux. Wealthy from river trade, positioned where the Garonne becomes navigable to the Atlantic. Take Toulouse. You control Aquitaine's economic heart. Control that. You dictate terms to Odo. Dictate terms to Odo. You've breached the last barrier between Al-Andalus and the Frankish kingdoms to the north. By May 10th, Al-Samh's vanguard reaches Toulouse's outer walls. Here's where military logic suggests a problem for the defenders. Toulouse in 721 isn't Constantinople. Its walls date from late Roman times, brick and stone. Impressive for a provincial city, but not designed to withstand contemporary siege warfare. The city spans roughly 200 acres inside those walls, maybe 15,000 people. Odo has perhaps 3,000 fighting men, total garrison troops, city militia, scattered cavalry that made it back from Carcassonne. Against 40,000, standard medieval mathematics. Surrender or die. But Odo doesn't surrender, doesn't send envoys to negotiate. Instead, he orders the gates barred, orders civilians into the city center away from walls, orders every ounce of grain counted and rationed. His commanders think he's insane. Paul the Deacon, writing decades later in Historia Langobardorum, preserves a fragment of dialogue, probably legendary, but psychologically revealing. The Duke was asked how long he intended to resist. He replied, "Until God or the enemy makes the decision unnecessary," which means, until relief arrives, or everyone inside starves. Al-Samh, experienced in Byzantine-style siegecraft, doesn't waste men on assaults. He studied the fall of Antioch, the siege of Constantinople itself. He knows impatient commanders get their armies killed against walls. Instead, he does something that seems boring, but is devastatingly effective. Nothing. Well, not nothing. He builds. May 10th through May 25th, Umayyad engineers construct a complete siege perimeter. Not a loose blockade, a systematic investment. Camps positioned every quarter mile. Trenches connecting them. Supply depots behind the front lines. Communication posts for signal flags. Within 2 weeks, Toulouse is cut off from the world. No food goes in. No messages go out. No cavalry raids from inside can break through because Al-Samh has positioned his camps in mutually supporting formation. Attack one, 2 others converge on you. It's not flashy, it's mathematical. And it works. Inside Toulouse, arithmetic becomes destiny. 3,000 defenders eating soldiers' rations, 90 days of food. 15,000 civilians on starvation portions, maybe 4 months. After that, choice is narrowed to surrender, cannibalism, or death. Odo counts days, counts sacks of grain in warehouses, watches his daughter, recently widowed, walk the walls at dawn. She's looking east, toward Carcassonne, toward where her husband died, looking for relief that isn't coming. Because here's the trap Al-Samh has set. Odo can't relieve himself. His army is split, part inside Toulouse, part scattered across Aquitaine after the Carcassonne disaster. To gather a relief force means abandoning the city to gather troops. To stay means watching Toulouse starve. Either choice leads to defeat. Al-Samh knows this. His confidence shows in the disposition of his camp. No defensive perimeter facing outward. Why would there be? Odo's field army is broken. The siege will end through hunger, not combat. 3 months. That's the calculation. By mid-August, Toulouse opens its gates, and Aquitaine kneels. Except, May turns to June. The siege holds. Inside the walls, rations dwindle. Outside, Al-Samh's men settle into routine, the dangerous comfort of unchallenged success. Supply wagons arrive regularly from Narbonne. Local crops get harvested to feed the besiegers. Frankish resistance has evaporated. Everything proceeds according to plan. But somewhere beyond the siege lines, in villages and forests, Al-Samh's scouts don't quite reach. Something is gathering. Messages travel in code. Riders move at night. Odo scattered cavalry survivors from Carcassonne. Garrisons pulled from secondary fortresses. Personal retinues of Aquitanian nobles begin concentrating at rally points 50 miles from Toulouse. Al-Samh's intelligence officers report rumors. The governor dismisses them. Why wouldn't he? His siege is perfect, his position unassailable. Even if Odo gathers 10,000 men, unlikely they can't break a siege perimeter held by 40,000. June 20th. Inside Toulouse, food runs critically low. Outside, Al-Samh's camp sprawls comfortable and complacent across 3 miles of river valley. Both commanders believe they understand the situation. Both are wrong. Al-Samh ibn Malik al-Khawlani doesn't fit the image of an 8th century warlord. No berserker charges, no glory-seeking raids. He's 53 years old in 721, ancient by early medieval standards, and has spent 3 decades perfecting the unglamorous art of winning wars through logistics. His resume reads like an instruction manual in imperial conquest. North Africa campaigns under Musa ibn Nusayr, learned how to coordinate multi-column advances across hostile terrain. Conquest of Hispania, 711 through 718, perfected supply line management that kept armies fed while local populations starved. Pacification of Septimania, 719 through 720, mastered siege warfare against Visigothic fortifications that had stood since Roman times. Roger Collins, in the Arab conquest of Spain, notes something critical about Al-Samh's appointment as governor. Damascus didn't send him to raid. They sent him to administrate. His official title, Wali of Al-Andalus, translates loosely as governor, but it carries weight closer to viceroy. He doesn't just command armies, he collects taxes, establishes courts, builds roads. The Umayyad Caliphate is replacing the Visigothic kingdom with something permanent, and Al-Samh is the architect, which makes his decision to invade Aquitaine less about glory, more about geopolitics. The strategic logic appears in fragmentary Arabic chronicles preserved by later historians. Aquitaine under Odo exists in a power vacuum. Not quite Frankish Odo broke with the Merovingian kings years ago. Not quite independent, too weak to stand alone against either Franks or Umayyads. From Damascus's perspective, Aquitaine is unstable frontier territory begging to be stabilized. Take it now, before the Franks reorganize. Take it now, before local resistance crystallizes. Take it while Odo is isolated and vulnerable. Al-Samh's invasion isn't improvisation, it's policy. So when he settles outside Toulouse in May, he's not gambling. He's executing a plan that has worked everywhere else. Siege warfare, 8th century style, is psychological torture disguised as military strategy. You don't need to break walls if you can break will. Surround a city. Cut it off. Wait. Eventually, hunger makes negotiators of revolutionaries and cowards of heroes. Al-Samh has done this 7 times before. Tarragona, Narbonne, Béziers, Agde, Nimes, Lodève, Maguelone, all surrendered. All now pay taxes to Damascus. All integrated into the Caliphate's administrative machinery. Toulouse will be number 8. His camp reflects this confidence. 3 miles of siege perimeter, yes, but organized like a temporary city rather than a military fortress. The governor's golden tent sits at the center, not a tactical command post, but an administrative headquarters. Inside, clerks maintain records, quartermasters track supplies. Engineers draw plans for post-conquest reconstruction. Al-Samh conducts the siege like he's already won, because in his experience, he has. Contemporary descriptions filtered through much later sources paint him as dignified, austere, frighteningly competent. He doesn't drink. Prays 5 times daily, even during campaigns. Treats subordinates with formal courtesy that makes them more afraid of disappointing him than dying in battle. His tactical briefings are famous for their precision. If the enemy does X, we respond with Y. If they do Z, we respond with A and B simultaneously. Nothing left to chance. No room for chaos. The problem with perfect planning is it assumes cooperation from reality. June 1st, 22 days into the siege, Al-Samh receives the first troubling report. Scouts riding patrol north of Toulouse routine reconnaissance, checking for relief forces encounter Aquitanian cavalry. Not a scouting party, not refugees. A formed unit, maybe 300 strong, moving with purpose toward somewhere. The encounter lasts minutes. The Aquitanians withdraw before Al-Samh's scouts can engage properly. The governor convenes his staff. Maps spread across tables in the golden tent. Where did those cavalry come from? Odo's forces were scattered after Carcassonne. 300 horsemen represents significant reconsolidation. If Odo can field 300 in one place, how many total does he have mobile? One commander name lost to history suggests pulling back, fortifying the siege camp against external attack. Al-Samh dismisses this immediately. His entire strategy depends on maintaining pressure. Loosen the siege, Toulouse gets resupplied, and months of effort evaporate. Besides, 300 cavalry can't break a 40,000-man siege perimeter. The mathematics don't work. He's right. 300 can't break the perimeter. But what about 3,000? June 10th, more reports. Cavalry spotted west of the city, then north again, then east near Carcassonne. The pattern makes no sense unless it's not one force, but multiple forces. Unless Odo has been gathering scattered units, consolidating them beyond Al-Samh's reconnaissance range, preparing what? A relief attempt? A battle? Al-Samh does the calculation. Even if Odo assembles 5,000 cavalry optimistic estimate, they face 40,000 entrenched troops with interior lines and prepared positions. Cavalry charges break against organized infantry. Always have. The Byzantines learned this lesson 100 times against Persian cataphracts. The Visigoths learned it at Vouillé. The governor's confidence isn't arrogance. It's mathematics backed by military history. June 15th. Al-Samh orders defensive preparations anyway. Not because he's worried, because he's professional. Camps facing outward receive extra ditches. Supply depots get consolidated closer to the main body. Cavalry scouts expand their patrol radius to 30 miles. Every evening, commanders report to the Golden Tent. Every evening, the reports say the same thing. Aquitanian forces gathering, but too few to matter, too dispersed to coordinate. Paul Foraker's analysis, in the age of Charles Martel, identifies Al-Samh's fatal miscalculation here. The governor assumes Odo is trying to relieve Toulouse. Therefore, any relief force must come toward the city, must engage the siege perimeter, must fight the kind of battle Al-Samh has prepared for. But what if Odo isn't trying to relieve the city? What if he's trying to destroy the army besieging it? June 20th. Inside Toulouse, grain reserves hit critical. Odo's garrison has maybe 10 days left before starvation makes surrender inevitable. The Duke himself moves through the city streets, talking to civilians, inspecting defenses that serve no purpose because Al-Samh won't assault. He's waiting. Everyone's waiting. Outside, in the sprawling Umayyad camp, soldiers settle into evening routines, cooking fires, dice games. Letters home to Al-Andalus. 3 months of unchallenged siege have made them comfortable. Cavalry patrols report the same vague intelligence. Enemy forces somewhere out there, maybe gathering, probably too scared to attack. Al-Samh walks the camp perimeter at dusk, a habit from earlier campaigns. He checks sentry posts, inspects ditches, talks to junior officers. Everything appears correct, disciplined, professional. In his golden tent, maps show Toulouse surrounded, cut off, dying slowly. The plan working exactly as designed. What the maps don't show: 50 miles north, 10,000 Aquitanian cavalry mounting up. What they don't show: Odo's real strategy, the one he's been building while Al-Samh built his perfect siege. The trap. Inside the trap, Al-Samh knows too much history, too much theory, too much doctrine. He knows how sieges work, knows how relief forces fail, knows the mathematics of medieval warfare. He's right about all of it, and it's going to kill him. Odo the Great, 58 years old, Duke of Aquitaine for 3 decades, survivor of Frankish civil wars and Basque rebellions, sits in a farmhouse 40 miles north of Toulouse and does arithmetic that would make his bishops weep. 3,000 men inside the city, 15,000 civilians. Grain for maybe 12 more days on starvation rations. After that, surrender, massacre, or cannibalism. Those are the options when mathematics runs out. But Odo isn't calculating how to save Toulouse anymore. He's calculating how to kill Al-Samh. The shift in thinking happened weeks ago, probably mid-May, when scouts brought word of the siege perimeter's professional construction. Odo has fought enough campaigns to recognize quality engineering. Al-Samh's camps aren't vulnerable to cavalry raids, aren't vulnerable to relief attacks, aren't vulnerable to anything conventional medieval warfare can throw at them. The Umayyad governor has read the same Roman military manuals Odo has, probably read more. So Odo stops thinking like a duke defending his city and starts thinking like a predator hunting an army. The Chronicle of 754, written by a Mozarabic Christian in Al-Andalus who likely interviewed survivors, preserves a crucial detail, often mistranslated. Odo gathered forces not at Toulouse but beyond the enemy's sight, in the manner of wolves circling deer. Not a relief operation, a hunt. Here's what Odo understands that Al-Samh doesn't. A siege army is simultaneously powerful and fragile. Powerful because it's concentrated, organized, supplied. Fragile because all that concentration creates dependencies, supply lines, command structures, communication networks. Break those, you don't get a weakened army. You get chaos. April through May, while Al-Samh methodically reduces Carcassonne and invests Toulouse, Odo sends riders. Not to neighboring dukes, they won't help. Political fragmentation guarantees that. Not to the Frankish kings, they're busy murdering each other over succession. Instead, to his own vassals. To nobles scattered across Aquitaine whose lands haven't been touched yet, whose fortresses still stand, whose cavalry retinues are intact. The message, simple. Your duke is trapped. Your cities will be next. Bring every mounted warrior you have to the rally point by June 15th. No later. No excuses. It's a desperate gamble. Medieval vassalage is transactional. Lords protect vassals, vassals serve lords. But if the lord looks doomed, why die with him? Why not negotiate separately with the conqueror? Why not switch sides early and keep your lands? Some do exactly that. Names lost to chronicle silence, the ones who don't show up, don't send troops, quietly begin diplomatic contact with Narbonne, but enough come. Gascon nobles from the Pyrenean foothills. Lords from Bordeaux worried about being next. Personal retinues of Odo's own family. Veterans from earlier wars. Young men seeking glory. Old men seeking revenge for Carcassonne. They arrive in groups of 50, 100, 200. No single army. A constellation of war bands. By June 10th, Odo has assembled roughly 8,000 cavalry in camps, spread across a 30-mile radius north and west of Toulouse. Not concentrated in one location, Al-Samh scouts would spot that. Dispersed in forest clearings, river valleys, abandoned villages. Each group separate but coordinated through courier networks. This is where the genius appears. Or the insanity. The line is thin. Standard medieval relief tactics. Mass your army, march on the siege, force a pitched battle. It's what Al-Samh expects because it's what Roman military theory dictates. It's what Vegetius wrote in De Re Militari. It's what every military commander for 8 centuries has learned. Odo throws it out. His plan, reconstructed from fragments in Paul the Deacon and later Carolingian chronicles, depends on 3 simultaneous strikes. Not at the siege perimeter, where Al-Samh is strongest. At the logistics, keeping that perimeter functional, strike 1. Supply depots behind the lines. The wagon trains from Narbonne, the grain storage, the weapon caches. Burn them. Not to starve Al-Samh's army immediately, 40,000 men carry enough food for days, but to create panic, to make commanders worry about tomorrow instead of fighting today. Strike 2, communication posts. The signal stations connecting different parts of the siege perimeter. Overrun them. Kill the messengers. Make it impossible for Al-Samh to coordinate 40,000 men spread across 3 miles of river valley. Strike 3, the command center itself, the golden tent. Al-Samh personally. Because without the governor, without the one mind coordinating this professional siege, the army becomes 40 separate units with no unified direction. It's not a battle plan. It's an assassination disguised as cavalry tactics. The risk is staggering. Split your forces into 3 groups. They can be defeated piecemeal. Attack simultaneously at multiple points. One group fails and compromises the others. Strike at the command center. You're betting everything on finding and killing one man in the chaos of combat. Miss him, and your divided forces get crushed by a concentrated response. Medieval warfare doesn't work this way. You don't fragment your strength. You don't rely on perfect timing across units that can't communicate once fighting starts. You don't gamble entire duchies on 3-pronged cavalry raids. Unless the target isn't expecting it. Unless the target is so confident in his defensive perimeter that he hasn't fortified his interior. Unless the target's entire army is oriented toward keeping people in Toulouse trapped rather than keeping attackers out. Al-Samh built a perfect trap for relieving forces attacking from outside. Odo isn't attacking from outside. He's attacking from inside the siege perimeter, striking at the soft interior the governor left exposed because conventional military wisdom says no one could get there. June 18th. Final war council in that farmhouse north of Toulouse. Odo's commanders' lords, whose names survive only as signatures on later documents, men like Eudes of Toulouse's brother Honald, like the Gascon Count Lupus, Like a dozen others history barely remembers, argue about timing. Wait longer? Gather more men? No. Toulouse has days left. Delay means the city surrenders before the attack can launch. Attack immediately with what we have? No. Troops are still moving into position. Rush it? Coordination fails? Plan collapses? Odo chooses June 21st. 3 days. Enough time for final positioning. Not enough time for Al-Samh scouts to detect the full scope of concentration. 3 days to move 8,000 cavalry into assault positions without being spotted by an army that controls every road within 30 miles of Toulouse. How? Night movement. Forest trails instead of roads. Small groups instead of columns. Cavalry units filtering through territory they know intimately. Terrain Al-Samh's occupation forces don't quite control, despite their numbers. It shouldn't work. Military history says it can't work. Coordinating simultaneous attacks by separated forces in an era before radio or telegraph, with timing dependent on sunrise and distance estimation, the margin of error is catastrophic. But June 19th passes, then June 20th. And Al-Samh scouts report nothing unusual. Some cavalry movement, but scattered. Nothing indicating imminent attack. Nothing suggesting a coordinated offensive. Inside Toulouse, food runs out. Odo's daughter, the one who watched her husband die at Carcassonne, walks the walls at dawn, June 21st. She's looking north again. Not for relief, for fire. For smoke, for any sign her father's insane plan is real and not a fantasy born of desperation. In the Umayyad camp, soldiers wake to routine. Sentry rotation. Breakfast. Morning prayers. Officers check perimeter defenses, the ones facing inward, toward Toulouse. Why would you fortify outward? The enemy is inside the city, starving. Al-Samh breaks fast in his golden tent. Maps spread across tables show a siege entering its final phase. Another week, maybe less, and Toulouse surrenders. Then on to Bordeaux. Then the Loire. The Caliphate expanding north according to plan. 40 miles away, 8,000 cavalry mount up. 50 miles beyond them, in scattered fortresses across Aquitaine, garrisons wait for news. The mathematics of desperation have resolved. Either Odo destroys an army today, or Aquitaine ceases to exist tomorrow. The sun rises on June 21st, 721. History is about to experience a rounding error. Dawn on June 21st comes slowly to the Garonne Valley. Mist rises from the river, thick and white, reducing visibility to maybe 50 yards. Al-Samh's sentries, positioned on the siege perimeter's outer edge, see nothing unusual. Just morning fog, just the river, just another day of waiting for Toulouse to starve. At 0600, the world catches fire. Northern sector first. Supply depot, 3 miles behind the siege lines. Wagons, grain sacks, spare weapons, medical supplies, everything that keeps 40,000 men functional. Hunold of Aquitaine's cavalry, 2,000 strong, hits it from 2 directions simultaneously. Not a probing raid, a demolition operation. The guards, maybe 300 men, positioned to prevent desertion and pilfering, not to repel military assault, die in the first 30 seconds. Hunold's riders don't stop to fight. They're carrying torches, carrying oil. Every wagon gets doused and ignited. Grain stores explode into flame. The smoke column rises visible for 20 miles. Al-Samh sees it from his tent, hears the distant screaming, immediately grasps the implications. Someone is behind his lines. But who? How many? From which direction? He sends runners to the northern camps, orders defensive formations, expects reports momentarily. The runners never arrive, because 615, western sector. The signal post's elevated wooden platforms with flag systems allowing communication across the sprawling siege perimeter start disappearing. Not abandoned, overrun. Lupus, the Gascon's cavalry, 1,500 riders who know this terrain like their own stables, systematically obliterates every communication node west of the Garonne. Al-Samh's siege perimeter, carefully constructed with mutually supporting camps, suddenly can't support anything, can't communicate, can't coordinate. Individual commanders see smoke, hear distant combat, and have no orders. Standard procedure says, maintain position, wait for commands from the governor. So they wait, while 0630, Eastern Sector. Odo himself, 58 years old, wearing armor he last used 10 years ago, leads 4,000 cavalry straight at the heart of the Umayyad camp, not at the siege perimeter, through the gap between perimeter and command center. The gap that isn't defended because conventional siege warfare doesn't require it. Ground level perspective. You're a Umayyad soldier. You've been on siege duty for 3 months. You woke up expecting breakfast and boredom. Instead, there's smoke north, screaming west, and now earthquake sound. Rumbling that makes tents shake. You step outside and see dust cloud approaching. Not dust. Cavalry. Thousands of them. Impossibly many. Impossibly close. Where did they come from? The perimeter would have stopped them. Should have stopped them. The perimeter is 3 miles away, oriented inward. These riders are inside. Panic is a chemical reaction. Adrenaline meets confusion, meets sudden understanding that you're about to die. The human brain isn't wired for processing cavalry charges. The primal hindbrain takes over. Run. So they run. Not tactically, not in formation, just away from the horses, away from the sound, colliding with their own comrades, creating bottlenecks, trampling each other. Odo's cavalry doesn't slow, doesn't stop to accept surrenders. They're not here to occupy. They're here to find one tent, one man. The golden tent stands at the siege camp's geometric center. 200 yards of open ground around it, parade space, really, where Al-Samh reviews troops. Right now it's filled with panicking soldiers. Odo's riders cut through them like lancets through flesh. The metaphor is exact. Cavalry lances, designed for penetrating armor, go through unarmored camp personnel with barely any resistance. Al-Samh emerges from his tent already armored. Give him credit. He doesn't freeze. It doesn't flee. His personal guard, maybe 50 elite warriors, the governor's household troops, forms a defensive square. Standard counter-cavalry tactic: plant spears, create a hedge, force horses to go around. It works for about 90 seconds. Then Odo's second wave arrives. Not lancers, javelin throwers. They circle the square at 40 yards, loose projectiles, wheel away before return fire. 3 volleys, the spear hedge collapses. Men fall with iron through their necks, their chests, their faces. Al-Samh is still standing, still giving orders, trying to organize a fighting retreat toward the nearest camp where Umayyad numbers might matter. He doesn't make it 50 yards. Multiple accounts chronicle of 754. Paul the Deacon, later Arab historians synthesizing lost sources agree on this. Al-Samh ibn Malik dies fighting. Not martyrdom, not execution. Combat, an Aquitanian writer named completely lost, probably a minor noble, possibly just a common soldier, catches the governor during the retreat attempt. Spear through the torso. Al-Samh falls from his horse. His bodyguards try to cover him. Die trying. The governor of Al-Andalus, architect of the Iberian conquest, veteran of 30 years' campaigns, bleeds out in Aquitanian mud, surrounded by dead men who died following his orders. Time approximately 0700. 90 minutes since the first attack. What happens next is organizational collapse in real time. Medieval armies function through personal loyalty chains. Soldiers follow captains. Captains follow commanders. Commanders follow the general. Remove the general. The chain doesn't transfer, it shatters. Al-Samh's subordinate commanders, experienced officers, competent men are scattered across 3 miles of siege perimeter. They're dealing with local crises, supply depot burning, communication cut, random cavalry attacks. Each one makes rational decisions based on incomplete information. Northern Sector Commander sees supply depot destroyed, assumes main attack coming from north, pulls troops inward to defend remaining supplies. Western Sector Commander loses contact with signal posts, assumes communication failure, sends runners to re-establish contact. Runners encounter Aquitanian cavalry, don't come back. Eastern Sector Commander hears combat from the center, where the golden tent is, tries to organize relief force. But organizing 3,000 men takes time. Forming them into defensive positions against cavalry takes more time. By the time he's ready to move, it's 0730, and word arrives, passed through panicked survivors, that Al-Samh is dead. Dead. The Eastern Sector commander, name unknown, probably dies later today, faces a decision. Advance toward combat to avenge the governor, or retreat toward Narbonne to save what's left. He chooses advance. Professional soldier's instinct. Never abandon a fight. It's the wrong choice. Because Odo hasn't stopped moving. His cavalry isn't occupying positions. They're fluid, hitting camp clusters, withdrawing before counterattacks form, repositioning, hitting again. The Aquitanians aren't trying to hold ground. They're trying to create continuous chaos. And it works because Al-Samh built his siege for one purpose, keeping Toulouse trapped. The camps face inward. The defenses point inward. Everything about the Umayyad position assumes threat comes from inside the walls. When threat comes from outside, from behind, from the supply lines, from the undefended interior, there's no contingency plan, because the plan was perfect. The governor made sure of it. 0800. Umayyad casualties are already catastrophic. Not from pitched battle, from panic. Soldiers crushed by their own comrades fleeing cavalry. Soldiers trapped in burning tents. Soldiers cut down while unarmed, while sleeping, while trying to understand what's happening. The ones who form defensive positions survive. Infantry, properly deployed in tight formation, can absolutely stop cavalry. But proper deployment requires orders. Orders require command structure. Command structure requires the governor, who's dead. Some camps manage it. Eastern Sector rallies around their commander, forms a hedgehog of spears, repels 2 Aquitanian charges. They're still standing at 0830 when word circulates. General retreat to Narbonne. Whoever gave that order, no chronicle records, just sentenced thousands. Because medieval retreats from battlefield are when casualties multiply. Organized withdrawal, maintaining formation, protecting flanks, that's how you survive. Panicked rout, every man for himself, abandoning wounded, that's how you get massacred. The Umayyad army, 3 months ago, a professional force 40,000 strong, disintegrates into scattered mobs running south. Some toward Narbonne, some toward Carcassonne, some just away. Away from the horses, away from the screaming, away from the nightmare of watching your impregnable siege turn into your tomb. Odo's cavalry pursues for miles, not chivalrous combat. Execution. Riders overtaking, fleeing infantry, killing them from behind, moving to the next group. The Garonne runs red. Literally. Chroniclers mention it. The river choked with bodies. 0900. 3 hours since dawn. The siege of Toulouse is over. Not lifted. Not negotiated. Erased. Inside the city walls, Odo's daughter watches smoke rise from the Umayyad camp. Watches survivors fleeing south. Understands, slowly, that her father has done something that shouldn't be possible. From the battlements, defenders can see Aquitanian cavalry reforming in the ruins of Al-Samh's headquarters, can see the golden tent burning, can see what victory looks like when mathematics breaks. The gates of Toulouse open, not to surrender, to pursue. The body count takes weeks to establish. Nobody counts accurately during massacres. The Chronicle of 754 claims innumerable multitudes died. Arab historians, writing a century later from fragmentary sources, put Umayyad casualties at more than 70,000. Probably exaggeration. Probably. Conservative modern estimates. 15 to 20,000 dead in the immediate battle in pursuit. Another 10 to 15,000 captured, wounded, or missing. Of Al-Samh's 40,000 strong invasion force, maybe 10,000 make it back to Narbonne intact. The rest? Corpses rotting in Garonne Valley farmland, prisoners sold into slavery, deserters vanishing into Pyrenean mountains. It's one of the most complete military annihilations of the early Middle Ages. Worse than Adrianople. Approaching Cannae-level devastation, a professional army, led by one of the era's finest commanders, ceases to exist in 3 hours. The immediate consequences reshape southern Gaul. Umayyad expansion north of the Pyrenees, the project Damascus spent a decade building stops, not pauses, stops. Narbonne remains under caliphate control, but aggressive campaigns into Frankish territory end. Future governors operate defensively, consolidating Septimania rather than conquering Aquitaine. Al-Samh's death removes the one commander with vision and competence to pull off trans-Pyrenean empire building. Odo becomes, briefly, the most powerful lord in southern Gaul. He's defeated what Frankish kings couldn't, the Umayyad Caliphate, in open battle. His prestige is unmatched. His military reputation unquestioned. For 5 years, 721 through 726, Odo the Great lives up to his title. Then history starts forgetting him. 732, 11 years after Toulouse, another Umayyad invasion crosses the Pyrenees. Not Al-Samh's professional conquest, a massive raid led by Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi, seeking plunder more than territory. The force ravages Aquitaine. Odo, now 69 and unable to repeat his earlier miracle, requests help from the north. Enter Charles Martel, mayor of the palace, effective ruler of the Frankish kingdoms despite technically being subordinate to the Merovingian king. Ambitious, ruthless, building the power base his descendants, the Carolingians, will use to found a dynasty. Martel brings an army south, meets Abdul Rahman near Tours-Poitiers. The battle lasts maybe a day. Abdul Rahman dies like Al-Samh, killed in combat. The Umayyad force retreats. Losses on both sides. Significant, but not catastrophic. Nothing approaching Toulouse's devastation. But this battle gets remembered. This battle gets chronicled. This battle becomes the Battle of Tours, where Charles Martel, the Hammer, saves Christian Europe from Islamic conquest. Every medieval chronicle written in the Carolingian sphere mentions it. Most dedicate pages. Some entire chapters. Toulouse gets 4 sentences in one Spanish chronicle. Why? Politics, narrative control, dynasty building. The Carolingians need legitimacy. They're usurpers, mayors who'll eventually overthrow their Merovingian kings. They need a founding myth, a moment when the family saved civilization. Tours-Poitiers provides it. Never mind that the invasion was a raid. Never mind that Umayyad forces withdrew on their own terms. Never mind that the actual decisive defeat of caliphate expansion happened 11 years earlier. History belongs to those who write it. Carolingian scribes write extensively. Aquitanian scribes barely exist. By the 9th century, when monasteries compile histories, Toulouse has been absorbed into a larger narrative where Martel is the hero. Odo appears as a footnote, the old duke who needed Frankish help. His solo victory, his impossible cavalry operation, his destruction of Al-Samh's army, minimized or omitted. Roger Collins documents this historical erasure precisely in Caliphs and Kings. He notes how contemporary sources from the 720s mention Toulouse prominently. Sources from the 750s mention it less. Sources from the 800s barely mention it at all. By the time Carolingian chroniclers write official histories, Toulouse is a minor skirmish before the real battle at Tours. The irony is savage. Al-Samh ibn Malik, professional conqueror, experienced commander, careful planner, dies leading the largest, most organized Umayyad invasion of Frankish territory. His death stops caliphate expansion permanently. Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi, leading a raid, seeking plunder, never intending permanent conquest, dies in a comparatively minor engagement. His death becomes legendary. Odo's daughter, who watched her husband die at Carcassonne and watched her father save Aquitaine, lives to see Charles Martel take credit for saving Christian civilization. She's 63 when Martel dies in 741, celebrated as savior of Europe. No chronicle records her opinion, probably wise. The soldiers who rode with Odo that June morning, the ones who survived, tell stories in taverns. Their grandchildren tell stories. Then the stories fade. Not because they're false, because the Carolingian version is louder, better funded, institutionally supported. By year 800, if you ask a Frankish scholar about stopping the Saracens, they mention Tours, mention Martel. If you mention Toulouse, they look confused. What happened to Toulouse? Everything. everything that mattered, and nothing that survived historical memory. Contemporary travelers to Toulouse can visit the site, well, approximately. Urban development over 12 centuries makes precision impossible. Somewhere in the modern suburbs, under apartment buildings and parking lots, lie the remains of Al-Samh's golden tent. Somewhere in those fields, 15,000 men died in 3 hours. There's a small plaque. Mentions the date, mentions the victory. Doesn't mention that this battle, not Tours, not Poitiers, actually halted Umayyad expansion. Doesn't mention Odo's tactical genius. Doesn't mention that medieval military history's most successful cavalry raid has been forgotten in favor of a more politically convenient battle. Tourists photograph the plaque, move on, visit the cathedral. History doesn't care about fairness, it cares about narrative. And the Carolingian narrative, built on Martel's reputation, built on Tours' Poitiers legend, built on convenient amnesia about Aquitanian victories, that narrative won. Odo the Great dies 735, age 72. His obituary in surviving chronicles, brief. His achievements, unmentioned or attributed to others. His impossible victory. A footnote. Al-Samh ibn Malik al-Khawlani, buried somewhere near Toulouse, exact location lost, receives more attention in Arab chronicles than Odo does in Frankish ones. Islamic historians remember him as a martyr, a great commander defeated by circumstances. Christian historians barely remember him at all. Both men deserve better. The 15,000 dead deserve accuracy. The battle that actually stopped the caliphate deserves recognition. Instead, Charles Martel gets a biography on every history podcast, gets credited with saving Europe, gets remembered, and Toulouse? Toulouse gets forgotten. Today, Toulouse thrives. 500,000 people, fourth largest city in France, aerospace capital of Europe. The Garonne still flows through its center, past medieval bridges and Renaissance mansions, carrying no memory of the morning it ran red. The city's tourist office mentions 721 in historical timelines. Mentions it the way you'd mention a street name change or a mayoral succession. Battle of Toulouse, Umayyad siege defeated. Move along, next exhibit. Stand in the right spot northeast of the old city, near modern suburbs, and you're approximately where Al-Samh's golden tent burned. Approximately. 1,200 years of construction don't preserve battlefield geography. There's a Carrefour supermarket there now. A bus stop, someone's apartment building. No monument, no museum, no tourist industry built on the day civilization was saved like you find at Tours. Because the narrative that survived wasn't about Toulouse saving itself. It was about needing rescue from the north. The plaque, the small one, easy to miss, sits on a side street near Saint-Sernin Basilica. Installed 1983, municipal project, not national. The inscription, in memory of Duke Odo's victory over Saracen forces, June 21, 721. 92 words total. No mention of casualties. No mention that this battle, not Tours, broke Umayyad expansion. No mention that 8,000 cavalry destroyed 40,000 in 3 hours using tactics that shouldn't have worked. Local historians know. Paul Foraker knows. Roger Collins knows. Academic papers cite Toulouse's significance. But academic papers don't compete with 12 centuries of Carolingian propaganda repeated in every medieval chronicle, every nationalist history, every textbook that needs a simple story about heroes saving Europe. The question we started with. How does a small city defeat 100,000 men? The answer we discovered is, it doesn't. A brilliant commander, gambling everything on 3 simultaneous cavalry strikes against an enemy convinced of its invincibility, destroys an army that stopped thinking like prey. The city just watched. The walls just stood there. Toulouse's contribution was bleeding slowly enough that Odo had time to gather forces elsewhere. The victory wasn't about walls or supplies or resilience. It was about Al-Samh building a perfect siege with its back exposed. About Odo recognizing that perfection's blind spot. About mathematics failing when someone refuses to accept the equation. Al-Samh ibn Malik was right about everything. His siege was unbreakable. His logistics were perfect. His tactics were textbook. He was right about everything except the possibility that someone would ignore the textbook entirely. The golden tent burned. The governor died. The army that couldn't lose disintegrated. And within a generation, the story transformed into footnote status because the next battle had better political optics. History is written by survivors, but it's remembered by those who control the narrative machinery. Carolingian monasteries had more monks, more scriptorium, more institutional backing than Aquitanian chroniclers. Tours Poitiers had Charles Martel, who needed the victory for dynastic legitimacy. Toulouse had Odo, who was dead before the Carolingians finished rewriting history. So the echo fades. The plaque goes unnoticed. Tourists photograph cathedrals and eat cassoulet and never wonder about the fields where June 21st, 721 proved that impossible is just a failure of imagination. Somewhere under that carrefour, Al-Samh's bones probably remain. No marker, no memorial. Just the governor who knew too much, planned too well, and died anyway. Welcome to Valor and Violence, where forgotten victories teach more than famous ones, where battles that changed everything get remembered as nothing, where the greatest cavalry raid in medieval warfare is a 4-sentence footnote in one Spanish chronicle. History doesn't care what actually happened. It cares what makes a better story. Toulouse happened. Tours got remembered. And that might be the cruelest victory of all. Toulouse vanished from memory. But you found it here. If you want more battles, history tried to bury the ones that actually mattered, not the ones that made good propaganda. This channel exists for exactly that reason. No algorithms, no clickbait. Just the wars they didn't want you to know decided everything. Next time, another victory no one remembers, another commander history erased, another moment when the impossible happened and the textbooks lied about it. See you then.